I wish I knew how to quit you.
Then why don't you?
This is Codependent Content, a podcast where my partner and I discuss the TV shows, movies, and video games in which we've formed an unhealthy relationship. My name is Mattias, and my co-host is Shannon Riley. Join us each week as we try to make sense of the media we continually give our hearts against our better judgment, and commiserate with us as we struggle and fail to let go of the characters, stories, and worlds that we are entangled with. Because just when we think we're done with content, it draws us back in. Hello, Shannon.
Hi, Mattias.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are talking about Yellowjackets, Season 2, Episode
1.
Do you have any thoughts or feelings about past week, Shannon, you want to share?
You know, I had a great week. I got some things done. I had some good... did you mean about the show we're going to talk about?
Anything. No, you can talk about... last week we talked about Everything Everywhere All at Once. We had a big drop-off in listeners, I think, which is not surprising to me. But I just want to acknowledge it, just because, you know what? People came for the Last of Us content, and unfortunately we can't be Last of Us all year round, so we're trying some new things.
Yeah.
But we're still happy about, I think, our discussion about Everything Everywhere All at Once, aren't you?
Absolutely. I love that movie. I'll talk about it forever.
Is there anything you missed, any feedback you got or thoughts?
I didn't get any extra feedback, but I really did enjoy... Every time you watch that movie, you come away with something a little bit different. So I feel like, even though I've seen the movie before, the rewatch is a watch with a new set of eyes. So it's a movie that doesn't get old for me and doesn't get stale. And even though I know it's going to happen, it still lands with me the right way every time.
Yeah, for sure. So again, this is a major test for us because we are going into something now completely different. Yellowjackets has no material as in video games or books or anything that we have any knowledge of. We have not seen anything ahead of this, so we're coming in fresh like everyone else, and we have no idea what we're going to talk about. And there's also something I think you mentioned last week, you love Everything Everywhere All at Once. We have a huge love for that, as well as The Last of Us. This is material and content that we were already in love with before we even talked about it, and just gave us more and more to talk about. Here, this is something where we are going into something that is maybe not top of our list, but is something that we still enjoy. Otherwise, we wouldn't talk about it.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I am flirting with and dating Yellowjackets, whereas I was in a fully committed relationship with The Last of Us.
Right.
Married, bury us together. But I do really love Lost. And as probably everyone knows, there are a lot of ways that you can draw similarities between Yellowjackets and Lost. So I'm excited. Each episode I watch of Yellowjackets just kind of sucks me deeper and deeper into the world. So I get more and more invested as we spend more time with these characters.
That was going to be my main question leading is talking about why we want to talk about Yellowjackets. So you just kind of said it yourself.
So I wanted to talk about Yellowjackets because it does remind me so much of Lost, and it's a show. Lost specifically is something that I found far after it premiered, and I'm excited to be a part of this sort of mystery box show while it's unraveling, because I missed that experience with Lost the first time. I missed everyone talking about the conspiracies and the flash forwards and backwards and sideways and figuring out where all the timelines made sense. And I think having that knowledge going into Yellowjackets might make our conspiracy theory chat more fun too, because it's limitless, but also love a good story about women trying to figure out how they relate to each other and what the fuck they're doing in life.
Sure.
So
is there, besides it starting off with a plane crash and a wilderness and a few time jumps back and forth, is there any other similarities to Lost that make this a watchable show for you or a must-watch kind of show?
It's mostly the thing that made Lost great wasn't how confusing it was. It was the relationships that were forced upon these characters by the necessity of where they were. So that's what I'm really interested in seeing in Yellowjackets, is that we see the adult versions of the island versions And I'm just interested to see kind of how all of that plays out. But I do think the more time we spend in the Yellowjackets universe, the crazier like some of these things are going to get. And I am kind of excited to see if it plays into the Lost. Like, are we going to get others? Mattias has never seen Lost, but like if you land in a new area, there should be something else there. So like I'm excited to see what the other is in this area. I'm also really excited to see like what the mysticism of Lottie's whatever she's going through is, and if that's connected to the location where they crash, similar to Lost, or if it has. I'm excited.
Sure. Okay. So just a few little housekeeping things just to get us started. Again, we are Codependent Content. You can find us anywhere you want, including social media like TikTok, Instagram. All the links are below. There are individual social media accounts. There's not a Codependent Content social media account. But if you do go to my website, you can also find this wherever you get podcasts, all those things. We do record this live. Today we are recording early. Last week we recorded late, but we do try to record these live Monday nights right now currently, usually around 6 p.m. Pacific time. And we try and engage with anyone who wants to listen to us, talk about it live. And then obviously we'll release it on Tuesday and you can get it wherever you get podcasts. This is a spoiler-filled discussion. So we are not going to hold anything back. If you're looking for a spoiler section or a non-spoiler section, you won't find it here. In this case, we don't know what's going to be happening coming up, but we will have theories. So if you don't even want those kind of theories or something, if you kind of want to stay fresh, feel free to just check out, maybe watch, listen to this later afterwards, come back to it. That's what's great about podcasts, yeah? So here we go. Shannon, do you want to talk about first maybe some things about the first season that you kind of loved, or things that kind of lingering mysteries or things that you're hoping that tie into season 2, as you're going, and what your expectations are going into this season?
So I'm going to be 100% honest with you and with everyone listening. My memory is garbage and I did not rewatch season 1 before we started season 2. So, I'm sorry. It is what it is. The little recap in the beginning was great, just so I remembered all of the big pointers. As I sort of already mentioned, I'm interested. I was semi-interested in what was happening with the adult version of people, but I was more invested in what was happening to teen versions post-crash. But now that we've introduced adult Lottie and Camp Green Pine kind of into the mix, I am very interested again in how Lottie's mysticism is like a through line through all of this. That's something that I'm really interested to see how it plays out. Everything else I feel is pretty much like interpersonal relationships, and they're going to be fun to experience as they develop. But right now, my biggest intrigue comes from like, what the fuck is Lottie doing, and how they get off the island, or how they get off the crash site.
Sure. I think the thing that I loved about the first season for me was that it was kind of a surprise, like a sleeper hit kind of thing. We actually had 2 shows come out the same year, I want to say, that was about like women, and I don't, forgive me if I'm wrong, they're not both soccer teams, but there's like, I think, but they're on a trip or whatever, and as teenagers, high school teenagers that are in a plane and then they crash, right?
Oh, the Wilds.
The Wilds,
yeah.
Which I did actually kind of enjoy for what it was.
Yeah.
And then Yellowjackets came along and I was like, oh, another show where I was like, okay. Yeah. But this one I think kind of blew the Wilds out of the water. The Wilds seemed like more, I guess, childlike in terms of like what Yellowjackets is actually dealing with, you know? And then the surprise of not only the kind of premise of like, okay, crash landing, now they're all stuck here, they're in survival mode in this wilderness. And of course that is compelling enough as it is. You could do an entire show just about that. Yeah. We saw that with Lost, right? But then we're flashing forward to them several, maybe 20 years after. I'm not exactly sure what the time frame is.
Right.
I'm sure there's an exact time frame. I'm just forgetting.
Yeah.
But probably 20 years afterwards.
Yeah.
And now, for some reason, these things are coming back to haunt them, and we're seeing how each of them have fared after this.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a few mysteries going on. There's a mystery of like, how do they get out of the wilderness and survive? There's the ongoing mystery of who does survive, because we don't see everyone as they are grown up,
Right.
you know? And then there's the mysteries of like, what is going on with them now? There's a blackmail kind of plot, and then other things. I've been curious because I think the writers are very smart. The showrunners seem to be very smart about this. I think they have a plan for these things. I'm not sure how that plan is going, though, because that is going to be a very interesting thing. I do think that the entire season was very, very strong. And then the biggest mystery about what the heck happened to Jackie was so compelling, right? Or like because we know that Jackie is kind of this revolving point around all the girls and stuff like that. And the fact that they not only revealed what happened to her, but the fact that she is dead and kind of died, was the first to die, you know,
Right.
was very, very interesting. Though that said, without her there going into season 2, there's something kind of missing there.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about like kind of the flashbacks now of those kinds of things, and we'll get more into those things. And then also something that happens in season 1 is Shauna kills her boyfriend who she's having an affair with, Adam, and then the girls cover it up because they're all trying to figure out who blackmailed them. They all seem to be together, and then they cover it up. They get rid of the body and things like that. That is a huge step, I think. There's so many things going on, and then like that at the finale just kind of like propels the show into new territory. All these things are like really hard. Now what do you do for season 2? Like now, how do you continue? Because you set like such a high bar, but you're also setting things up. And this is what you do. This is how Breaking Bad did it. You write yourself into this corner, and how do you kind of get out of it kind of situation? And how do you feel like in this episode, what are your general thoughts on how they've managed to continue the story?
I think it's great that we're getting more named Yellowjackets. Because kind of like what you said, we don't know who lives because they're very tactful about not really showing or not showing things. So I almost feel like if you ever need new characters, we can find them on this soccer team. So I like that that's an open space that they can play around in. And I know I keep saying it, but Camp Green Pine is going to be wildly interesting. Whatever sort of camp Lottie is running is going to, I think, play a huge pivotal role, even more than the murder like brought the girls together. I think now that trajectory is going to lead toward Camp Green Pine. So I think that at the end of this season, we're going to be like, okay, now how do they go into season 3 and top that? Because I have a feeling there's going to be some weird shit going on there.
Okay. Again, do you think they did well with this episode? Do you like?
I like this episode. I think it was a good like episode 1. It brought me right back into the world. There were a couple moments where the dialogue felt a little forced to me. Like I could almost like hear that someone wrote it, and I don't know if that actually makes sense. But I think that all of the actors, both teen and adult versions, are still doing such a good job at creating that connective tissue. So there's no disconnect when you're watching like teen Shauna versus adult Shauna. And the only place I see a little bit of a disconnect, I think, would be, oh gosh, what's her name? The woman in the leather pants. What is her name? Natalie. I think teen Natalie and adult Natalie are just a little bit different from each other. Whereas all the other teen and adult versions, like you see the neurotypical tendencies in young Misty and adult Misty, and you see Shauna's, even down to like the mannerisms. The actors kind of share the mannerisms, but I think Nat is someone where I'm missing a little bit of that connective tissue, but it doesn't take me out of it. Like I said, I think it's a good first episode. It got me right back into where I needed to be with no questions, and really just set me up with more questions for what are we going to cover through the rest of these episodes.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm a little bit different on this episode. I feel like there's a lot of wheel spinning, and there's again a lot of things that they set up with the first season that I do not think set up season 2 in a good way. And then with that they came back to, it just felt like I didn't feel as engaged with it, I guess, until near the end of it. Where things kind of start coming together. And I understand that this is a first episode of the season. They have to kind of bring you back into the world. They have to reintroduce you to the characters. There are a lot of characters that are going on, and they have to introduce kind of like everyone's things, and what they're kind of dealing with. I think to me, the interesting thing is that all the places of conflict that were happening with season 1 kind of almost get that. Well, they all get killed off, You have the Christian girl who I can't remember her name, like dies in a plane crash, or I guess does she? Because there's like an image of a plane in like a future season, in the upcoming episode or whatever. But like that, but she's supposed to be dead. I don't think she's coming back. But like the idea is like she could have been an interesting conflict between her and Lottie, even though they were kind of like sharing similar things. Even though I loved how that happened, and she, shows like we're not going to be able to get off this place like that easily for whatever reason, right? And then Jackie dying is also like that could like is Shauna's main point of conflict, right? And as well as like a big friction between her and the rest of the group, and the survival, and how that affects us as we have to survive in the wild and then come back. And then Adam, of course. And then, so there's a lot of things that were like, they kind of almost tied up neatly, even though it was basically like kill off these characters. And now it's like, well, what are these things that we're dealing with, Right. Is it Tatiana? Or is it Thaisa? Sorry, I can't know. Thaisa is got them like, I guess the most interesting thing going on in terms of like what actually is her sleepwalking thing, because her conflicts were always between her and her wife, and like what's going on between her and herself, and that kind of stuff there. And I think, as you mentioned, like Lottie is super, super interesting. Like, what is her deal? And they clearly they open up this episode like with her getting the treatments, the electrode treatment, which I didn't know they still did in the 90s. Yeah. But I guess they did. And then they're clearly trying to like bookend to make her the biggest thing mystery here. But then everyone else is like, okay, so now Shauna's trying to deal with like kind of murder mystery stuff, and Misty's looking for Lottie, but they're all separated. And we had gotten them together at the end of season 1, and now they're all not working it. And I don't know where all this is like tying into. So they're just kind of doing things, but I'm not exactly sure what their main thing is besides, not getting caught for murder,
Yeah. I can sort of agree with you there. And I think it's because I am so interested in what Lottie is, that I'm willing to kind of just be along for that ride. But I also think we get thrown back into this cabin in the middle of winter. Rations are low. Like Shauna's still dealing with grief and guilt. And I think that's a really interesting place. It's like, how long do you watch two teenage girls pick at each other the same way? And although I liked Jackie, and the actress that played Jackie was so like charismatic and likable somehow. Yeah. Her light not being in the show is palpable, but I think that using that death to motivate Shauna, I think is going to bring us to is going to help propel us to darker places. So I kind of see what you mean about like, it's a little bit table setty, just trying to get you back in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't, I was going to say something about Lottie again. Oh, I'm very interested in Lottie, but I feel like we didn't get to spend a lot of time with young Lottie this episode, teen Lottie this episode. We just kind of see her like making some blood tea and drawing something on the window.
Well, she's embraced whatever it is her thing is. Right. And this is, I think, the question for some reason that everyone's like, who is the person under the, I guess, the mask in the very, very first episode teaser? I can't remember what the mask was, what they were wearing, but there's always been that like question, who's wearing, who is that? And I'm like, come on, like we all assume it's Lottie,
Is it
right?
Lottie?
Like
It's
there's
Lottie.
no, I don't think it's really a big mystery there.
Right.
And then there's also like the allusion to cannibalism in that first episode. So we always kind of knew we were kind of leading to that, right? And then the mystery of who's the person that they're quote unquote eating, whatever it is that's going on there, because there's someone that falls into a trap and so there's still like a lot of things that are going on there. And I think we are just further and further like just alluding to the fact that Lottie is embracing whatever it is that she's becoming.
Like wicked
and,
shit.
Yeah.
As they called
And to be the leader of this kind of tribe, because the more she does, she even kind of brings more people onto her side, because when she tells Travis like Javi's alive and he wants to believe that, like either he or she has like some sort of vision. I think it's him, right? Some sort of spiritual experience, and that now he's starting to believe. And then the more that happens,
right,
we're going to see like she's just, I think that's why we don't need to spend that much time with her, because we're seeing like she's just kind of embracing. I think we'll get more of that. Yeah,
I do too. I think something, a main theme for me in this episode, and I feel probably throughout the season, is like reckoning with our inner darkness and our primal selves. And Lottie is a wonderful, glaring example of that, because on the island, in the crash, I'm just going to keep saying on the island. Okay. It's the island. But on the island, she like really steps into her power. And I don't know if she's like a conduit of something, like if she sees herself as just the vessel that's able to bring help and guidance to these people, or if she has that power within her. But she's in such a position of like fullness and authority and comfort almost. And then boom, we see her after she gets off that plane and she's screaming. Her parents are like, we don't know what to do with her. She's basically catatonic. Like they put her through shock therapy. All these girls lose parts of themselves that they discovered on the island. And I don't know, as a veteran, if you feel this way, but I can kind of imagine, I'm also have never served in a war before, but like if you're in these drastic situations and then you have to come back and like integrate into normal life, and how difficult that can be for some people. And I feel like we watch Shauna just shrink herself, and she's a stay-at-home mom with Jeff and her kids, and she's not happy, but she's doing it. And then you see someone like Lottie, who came back, was like forced to try to be normal, wasn't doing well, and then we see is doing exponentially better now that she's at Camp Green Pine. And she's able to step back into that position of like power and freedom. So I'm interested to see how that comes into play throughout the season and with these different characters that we spend time with, because there are dark parts in all of us. And I think those dark parts really come out at that crash site for all the girls while they're like stuck in that area.
Yeah, there's definitely this idea that everyone was almost a, I guess, more realized or better version of themselves. Something, obviously, whatever they dealt with is a shared trauma and is something that that they left behind at that place, right? I mean, we know that from like season 1. We see how Natalie is this person who slowly finds her purpose in hunting and helping protect people. And then she also kind of, quote unquote, falls in love with Travis, whatever you want to call that kind of thing. And when she's an adult, she's struggling. She almost kills herself at the end of the season. And she's just alcoholic, addicted to and just kind of struggling
Mhm.
throughout her entire life. Same with Shauna. Shauna's just kind of going through motions and
Emotions.
stuff, you know, and it starts an affair to have some sort of excitement because whatever she doesn't feel
Mhm.
any, it's just weird, you know? And yeah, everyone I feel like is dealing with that, and they're all like missing something of themselves. Misty's the only one that like she recognizes that and she wants that, right? Because that
Yeah.
was the only place where I guess she had to have friends or had, you know, or something
Yeah.
going on, you know,
Yeah.
because she was able to kind of, I guess, fully be herself because she can't be herself in this thing. I think Christina Ricci and Misty is like the most interesting character to me. And it's probably to do with Christina Ricci's performance. Like she's
so good.
amazing. Like whatever she's doing, it's like, I just want more of her. And that I'm also super interested in having Elijah Wood come into play. And I think that's his voice that we hear when she's reading the Reddit post about the criminal bureau network or whatever.
Do you think?
I think so. I'm not exactly sure, but they use a voiceover there. And I was like, why would they use this voice
Right.
if it's not like
Gonna
someone
come
that's going to
into
come into play later, you know?
Smart.
It sounds a little bit like Elijah Wood. I thought they were already friends, but it sounds like maybe they kind of team up in terms of whatever. But I don't know what she's covering up her murder and keeping her eye on that because she wants to keep everyone safe and in control because these are her friends, you know, kind of thing. And then she's also trying to find Lottie, you know. So there's two things going on there, and I don't know where like Elijah Wood's coming into play and what that is, but that is also the most interesting thing. I think if this was just a show with those two, like I'd already like be I'd be on board, right? But beyond that, I didn't know where I was going with that. But I do want to mention that I am curious. This is an interesting thing because again, we're spinning wheels in this episode, and from what I read, there's screeners had went out to people. What would you call them? Press and journalists, people who watch these things, right? And talk about and review them. 6 episodes have gone out. I think 6 of like 12 or 6 of 10, right? So like from what I read, this is going to be it for the next like 6 episodes. They all eventually maybe do get back together. It's not a spoiler. It's just, I mean, I don't know. I don't exactly know how things happen, you know?
Yeah.
I'm kind of speculating, but going off of what people said, I am curious, like how these things are all going to tie together, and it's going to be, I guess, I think a little bit more of this for next episode. So I am a little bit, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Cautious about what's coming up in terms of like what we expect, you know? Because again, there's not that many things like really set up that I feel like, and there were so many more things set up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what was I talking about earlier? Christina Ricci, Misty is serial killer level of interesting. She does kill someone also in the last season, and that whole journalist aspect also was a big, interesting subplot. So again, we got rid of a few subplots, and then now we're, I guess, starting new ones. I have no idea what's kind of going on. Do you want to talk about Jackie and Shauna for a little bit and figure out what the heck is going on there?
Honestly, I would like to because for as fucked up as it is, like it's so sad. What a sad, like if you really imagine yourself in that position, that you're dealing with, you're 15, 16, 17, however old, and you're dealing with the guilt of your dead best friend. And this is almost like therapy for Shauna. Like I think I have this written down somewhere. Like she's talking to herself and she's holding herself accountable for the things that she wasn't able to like say out loud to Jackie while she was alive. Almost. She's reckoning with things like, she says, I didn't know that Jeff was going to break up with Jackie because Jackie didn't want to have sex with him. And Jackie's like, yeah, you did. You did know. And Shauna's like, fuck yeah, I did know. So it's like she's reckoning with all these things that she's almost also been lying to herself about to ease her own guilt and shame. And I think that's really interesting. And I do like that all the other Yellowjackets are aware that this is something that's happening to Shauna. And I am appreciating the empathy that some of our like big players are trying to extend to her. That even though like, yeah, it's been 2 months, but she is in deep grieving, and it is not up to us to judge like how she works through these big emotions. So I think that's really interesting. What did you think about?
Well, I was wondering if they were
session?
going to bring Jackie back.
Right.
Again, because she was such a big major part of the show and the character dynamics in general,
Mhm.
right? And so yeah, when the scene started, I was like, is this a flashback? What's
Right.
going on? And then the reveal, I was like, oh, that's super like morbid. I
Yeah.
don't know how I feel about this.
It's
like
I liked it because I think
because she's not real. I like seeing the actress back, but she's not real. So I'm like,
Right.
everything that Shauna's dealing with, I'm like, this makes Shauna's relatively she's dealing with some things,
Mhm.
obviously. But she's living a relatively normal life,
Mhm.
you know? Maybe this will come into play more about just the fact that like she is living with and has been for 2 months talking to
her dead
her
best
dead
friend.
best friend. That's morbid. I do like the little touches that happen probably in post-production. I don't know where the decision was made. I didn't catch it the first time. I wish they had held off the reveal a little bit because maybe I would have noticed it a lot sooner. But when Jackie's speaking, there's no cold air kind of breath kind of coming out. And then when Shauna's speaking, there's that it's added in post. It's
That's
not
really
like a
cool.
real, but you can see her breath kind of, it's so cold kind of thing.
Mhm.
But of course, Jackie doesn't have it because she's not real and
'Cause she's not
dead.
talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that was there at the very beginning, but they reveal it so quickly, I didn't notice until like afterwards. And they
Yeah.
still continue with that when she's out in the meat
Oh,
shed.
cool.
Um,
Well, why do you think Shauna kept her ear?
well,
Don't laugh.
I don't know. There's no reason. She's afraid of disfiguring her best friend, and then everyone finding out that she's been like, I guess that she touched or whatever. Or I don't know, and what she been doing. I don't know what anyone expect at this point. You've already been talking to it for 2 months, but then to eat. Okay, we knew cannibalism was coming, but
Mhm.
I didn't think. I didn't suspect that Jackie would be the poor girl to get dragged into it. I think they're gonna eat Jackie first, right? That's gonna be the.
I feel like they have to. They're storing her in the fucking meat closet. Like, you got to eat Jackie.
They're starving and they can't find any food.
Yeah.
That's what they're leading up to. Is they're
Like,
gonna have to.
we have to eat Jackie.
Oh my god, I don't know. And I wouldn't. I tell you what, Shannon, I would not start with an ear. That's not. If I was gonna delve into cannibalism, I would not start with the like just straight cartilage. I guess. You know?
no, I would not either. But in Shauna's defense, it is just something that could like fall off your body. So, you know, if she had to go in there and be intentional, I'm sure she wouldn't have been like, I'll take the ear first. You know, you can go with something a little meatier.
She's not even gonna like put it over the fire a little bit. Like
Maybe
she's
it got
just
warm
gonna
in her pocket.
put it in.
It's like when I eat
It
cold
didn't
chicken
get
out of
cooked,
the fridge.
Shannon.
Some people like it's like raw. I don't know.
There are some questions about the survivalist nature of this entire show.
Well, since we've already just jumped into the fact that Shauna eats the ear that she keeps, I sort of felt the same way. I didn't know what motivated her to just pocket it, except for maybe again just more guilt and shame of like I'm still hurting and like ruining this thing,
Mhm.
and instead of leaving it here for other people to see the damage, I hide the damage in my pocket,
Mhm.
and it's a like visual of the guilt that she carries with her anyway.
Yeah.
But then jumping forward to the end of the episode, why do you think she eats Jackie's ear? Do you think it's because she's hungry?
I think she's hungry. She's also got a growing child inside of her. So
The child is hungry.
maybe there's something connected there. And we are under the assumption that this child is her daughter, right? In the future.
Mhm.
So
Oh wait, no.
No.
We're just gonna jump right into this conspiracy. So I think the woman that we meet that's like Nat's kidnapper, bringing her food and stuff, I think that's Shauna's daughter.
What? Where is that thought come from?
If they're rescued in 97, and it's supposed to be like present day, that woman that we meet is age appropriate.
Yeah.
Shauna's actual daughter is too young.
Do we? We should figure out what the timeline is. Do we know what the timeline is?
Yeah, they get rescued in 97 because they crash in 96.
Okay.
And then it's like, I don't remember how many months, but there were some. The only reason I know this is because last season, I feel like they weren't super tight with the timeline.
Yeah.
So I noticed this time around, they say present day, whereas when season 1 came out, they were constantly referencing like 2021. So I think they're fudging the timeline just a little bit so you don't get caught in like, oh, it's supposed to be 2021, but now it's 2023. Like, it's just present day. And that leads me to believe that we're about 25 years post-crash, which means Shauna's actual tangible daughter, that's just a little brat, by the way, sometimes, is too young.
Oh, interesting. I wondered if her whole mystery kind of solving bullshit that she was going on was eventually going to lead her to like, I was born from a cannibal's body, and like, that's what.
It's just another thing.
That's
for her to
all the
complain
things
about.
that like that I gestated in. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just that's my little conspiracy theory for right now, because at the end of the episode, we're just potpourriing all over the place today, but at the very end of the episode,
I don't think we need to be landed.
It happens in threes, and it's Nat and Travis finding that like random melted spot in the wood, which we know like Lottie's altar never freezes over either. So like, do magical or mystical parts of this woodsy area like not operate the same way? So like, that was number 1. And number 2 is something with that girl whose name I forget. But I just like, if we keep seeing her, she's this new character that's introduced, and she's roughly age appropriate, and she's with Lottie. I think that would be a really interesting thing to see, like how that connection was made, and also kind of makes me more comfortable because I was hoping they wouldn't eat the baby. I was nervous that like a stillbirth might happen.
There's definitely like a question of like what happened to this child, because when they get the reporters are they're getting on a plane, and the reporters are there saying like these girls are back. We don't see Shauna carrying a child.
No, we don't.
We would assume that they would be. The child could have been taken at that point. We have no idea where, like how long they've been back, or like where they're coming from, or what's kind of going on there. And so and we don't see all the girls, right? So yeah, I guess that's going to be an ongoing, lingering question throughout the season: is what happens to this child? So that's an interesting theory. I'd be curious if that comes to pass. You heard it here first. Codependent Content. Tell people. But yeah, let's talk about what's going on with Natalie. I think Natalie, I think the younger one, especially as portrayed by this actress, is the most interesting character to me in terms of the teenager things going on. I think mostly because finding again this kind of purpose and finding this ways that you can help and know who you are, like out in this wilderness, and also kind of take charge and initiative and almost just be really good at these things, you know, is really interesting to me. And especially when we know where she's struggled the most, you know, it doesn't seem like anyone's cared about her. They kind of like left her to her own devices, even though she's pretty much single-handedly helped keep them all alive.
Right.
You know? So I'm curious, like, not much happens here, but clearly she's the only one helping out Ben. You know, she's the only one that Ben can trust. It's Ben, right?
I think so, yeah.
The coach.
Yeah,
who is absolutely like useless out here.
Truly.
Not only, I mean,
Truly.
obviously, like his leg is gone, I guess, but he's like, yeah, no, she's still grieving. You know, like, like doesn't even try. Like he's letting Lottie just believe it. He can't deal with it.
He literally
just
can't.
does not want to deal with it. Like Misty drugged them last season.
And
like
he's like, I fucking can't handle
these girls
any of
like
this.
almost raped Travis
I
or
know,
something. Or
I know.
like he's
Oh my
like,
God.
you know what? You guys do you.
Y'all figure it
I'm
out.
just gonna
I'm gonna make
he's
this
like,
secret map.
as long as Natalie is there to help him, he's fine.
All right. Now, why do you think they're keeping the map a secret from the other campers?
I think the more information, the more that they spread out and the more they find out that they're alone and that there's nothing out there and that there's no way out of here, the less you want to tell people that because they're clinging on to any sort of hope that eventually they might be found or something like that, right?
Right.
Because no one wants to believe that they're going to be here, not only during like maybe one winter, which might be the only winter because we do have that flash forward within our flashbacks of like them in the snow in the winter at the very beginning of and then when winter comes, that's when Jackie dies.
Right.
We hope they're not there for 2 winters. I don't think they're gonna. They definitely said in the report like how long ago it was. So I don't think there's multiple winters, but God forbid they're out there for more winters. But this is going to be a tough winter, and they're already running low on food, and they can't find food anywhere. So the last thing you want to do is tell them, well, we've mapped out 7 miles from our point, and we still can't find anything,
and have not found any animal is.
Keeping everyone calm and all that kind of stuff because there's no point. Yeah, I think is the best thing for them. Yeah, that makes kind of a little bit of sense, right?
Makes sense to me. Print it.
So yeah, I'm curious. We see Natalie placing markers because she's smart and she knows what's going on. I'm interested. You keep talking about Camp Green Pine. I've noticed, Shannon, that it looks like Camp Green Pine looks very, very similar to the wilderness.
It does. And that's my next conspiracy theory. I think what is happening is that Lottie, in the same way that Jack has to go back, Lottie had to go back.
She, whatever it is it's happening in this wilderness.
Yeah.
She has to be. I think eventually Natalie's going to find out that she's here. How they got her here, because it's definitely in another country. They had to fly, you know? How they got her here, I'm not exactly sure if it is the same wilderness. If not, it looks similar. So, like, clearly,
I think it is.
But I think she's going to run into some of her markers and it's going to trigger some things.
Oh.
Yeah. But it does look like that this resort, this camp, has not only grown beyond just the camp and their little area. We haven't seen the cabin per se,
right?
But like even the lake there's boats in it and stuff like that. So we can assume that if this is the same place, that there's a bit of, I guess, there's some, I guess, touristy things happening here. I don't know. You imagine that people came here for one reason or another, and clearly if she started it and she built this like cult, now it's far and wide like a kind of a famous place now because this is where the girls like, you know, were stranded or something.
Well,
you know, I don't know if that's what's...
if they're looking for Lottie, if they don't know where Lottie is, then it can't be that famous of a place, because if you were someone that was trapped on that area, wouldn't you be like, hey, this sounds a lot like kind of everything that we were dealing with?
That is interesting. Like but again, they're not out in the middle of nowhere because there are other things going on there. So yeah, they're not exactly looking for Lottie. They know Lottie's out there doing her thing. I don't think Lottie's hiding per se. Right. I don't remember what the deal is in the first season. They just don't know. They don't know that Natalie's been taken. Right. The only one that has any suspicions right now is Misty. They just assume that she left or wasn't coming around or whatever, you know? And Misty is the one that's finding out, something else is going on here, right? So they'll, I think, eventually piece together that it's Lottie. And it's not going to, I don't think it's going to take them that long to figure it out. And they know where to find her, I think. Because this seems like this is a public place. Whatever she's doing is this normal kind of resort, and then there's other things going on behind the scenes because she's clearly running a cult, right? For whatever reason, I don't know, right? But I think I wouldn't be surprised if we find out that Natalie finds a marker, one of her own markers, if it is the same place or not.
I agree 100%. I think Natalie is going to find something that clues her into the fact that she's back where they were crashed 25 years ago. I was imagining more. I like what you're saying, and I like the idea of it being this like public, everybody kind of knows about it thing. But I also much enjoy it being, why am I constantly referencing like Marilyn Manson and whatever? A little darker like that, where cults, like, you kind of know about them, but it's not a
Charles
destination.
Manson?
What did I fucking say?
Marilyn Manson.
Punch me in the face. I'm sorry. Charles Manson. That you know, again, you know of it, or like you hear like, oh, there's all these teens living out in the woods somewhere, and you're like, oh yeah, that's weird, but you don't really know or see or go there. And I kind of like this idea that Lottie somehow keeps connecting with these people who want to connect to their most like dark and primal selves. And Lottie's like, here I am. Here is my sigil. Like, this is how you come and be what you cannot be in like normal society.
But what is that? Like,
I don't know.
There's
I don't know.
dark. For what reason? Like, what are they doing? Like, why is she building this cult? And is it as simple as like some sort of like government thing? Kind of like you said, like we know about like Waco is like having a moment again, and then and that was also like in the 90s, you know, and very similar time, and then like you said, Manson, and like what was their kind of deal in terms of like just going and killing people. Like, we don't know what they're doing. We assume that she had something to do with Travis's death as an adult, but we don't exactly know what kind of was going on there. And that's what, I guess, turns them on to Lottie in the first place, I think, you know? But like, also, like, it's not really a big, again, mystery that they're trying to solve, you know? It's just, I just don't know why, you know, like what is the reason when you're out there in the wilderness and it keeps you alive, and it makes sense, right? And you're giving something to believe in, and then there are supernatural things happening in this forest or whatever. And then we're led to always wonder, like, is it really supernatural or is it just coincidence, right? And we're always wondering. And what's interesting to me is also Thaisa, where her sleepwalking thing is happening, but it doesn't also necessarily seem to be triggered by being in the forest.
Right.
Because it's happening as an adult as well. And it seems like it's always been kind of happening.
Yeah.
She just had some sort of like control over it, but like now it's just even worse.
Right.
And getting worse because of this thing. And that's not exactly supernatural, but but it clearly is tied to this place, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are like, is it supernatural, is it not? But so multiple characters are dealing with these things. There's visions and stuff. I kind of hate it because I'm like, I don't know if we're like what we want to believe, because we're not sure like what world we're in, right? It's again, when you explain like magic in a fantasy world, you know, but you don't give it like any rules, and you're not sure how things are supposed to work, you know, like, oh, I guess they can just do anything. There's no consequences or no right. And here we don't know, like, is it actually supernatural or is it just like all in their kind of heads kind of thing and just happening coincidentally? Yeah.
I am interested, like what you said with Lottie, like what is the point? And I don't have a fleshed out point, but it does kind of tie into another theme of this episode for me, and the timelines in general, I think, of like acceptance and rejection. I feel that being forced into the situation of the crash site and being in the wilderness, there's a certain type of acceptance that comes out of necessity, where for Lottie, it's like you accept this mysticism and like weirdness that's happening to you, and you are accepting the darker parts of you and the more feral, animalistic parts of you. But we see, or I wrote it down in a note, Thaisa and her sleepwalking problem. That Simone is like, you are not well, and if you don't get real help and seek treatment for whatever's actually happening to you, then Simone's going to take the kids away and go to the press and like is going to just cut distance and kind of take her down. Whereas the cute girl who got mauled by a wolf. What is her name?
Van.
Van. Oh gosh. Oh, I'm so excited to see adult Van. Anyway, whereas Van says, "You think I can't handle this? I'm not scared of you," and uses her own blood to say, "I love you" for the first time. Like, there's an acceptance.
That's a lot of blood from that lip cut, by the way.
That is a lot of blood, but whatever.
These show creators are really pushing the limits of like realism sometimes, and I'm like, guys, you need to.
It's the blood Okay.
That much blood is coming out of your lip, like you need to stop it. You
need to sew that shit
stitches.
But yeah, so just the idea of acceptance and rejection, I think, is something that we keep revisiting. Even through this episode, we see it with Shauna and Jeff.
Sure.
Where Shauna is sharing a darker part of her. She even says, like, I've had these fantasies and I've always like felt that it might make me a pervert. And she had an affair and he blackmailed everyone. But like, they're sharing their darker parts of each other, but there's still like a weird amount of acceptance.
That's such a weird thing for Shauna to admit, though, because I don't know that I had any indication that she was into that kind of stuff. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, yes, like not being satisfied with your own home life and then going and having an affair is one thing, but then to reveal that like, oh, I wanted you to be the one that had an affair, like, and I imagined it and I was getting that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, you are, I don't know how this ties into, like, because I don't know what's going on with her character, right? It feels a little bit different than what it was before. Before it was just cheating on your best friend, but now she's into open relationships, and I don't know. It's a little bit, it's a little off to me. You don't think so?
No, I definitely do. I just liked, I like that give and take, and that, again, I think, I have a whole couple of points here to make about that section of the show. But just the fact that you
make them, we don't. Yeah,
I'm going to in a second.
Yeah.
I'm going to finish this point of like the acceptance and rejection thing. It would be one thing for her to say that and him be like, "That's really fucked up, and you cheated on me." And instead, like, they bang.
Right.
Why do you think they bang in this dude's space? What do you think that sex in that moment meant for them?
To be completely honest, it's one of those things where I'm like, the writers said so, like they thought it was like some sort of tension-filled moment, and she reveals a thing that was sexy to her and turned her on, and so he's like, okay, well, maybe it turns me on too, and they do it. But it was also like kind of out of anger because he's in a situation where he's helping cover up the murder of the person like that she was cheating on him with, like there's, I guess, some anger going on there. Clearly, I mean, listening to Papa Roach afterwards. I mean, what else do you need, Shannon?
Yeah, I mean, it did kind of feel like a power play. Like they're playing with power dynamics together. Like they're both dealing with big, different emotions, and it like just cultivated in that weird, like primal way.
But also, can we talk about how, like, because I thought at the end of the first season that covering up a murder, very, very interesting, and they seemed. I was like, oh, interesting, because now everything that they learned about skinning animals and, breaking it apart and all these kind of things, and to use it to cover up a murder, so great to bring them back into their quote unquote element, their survival skills, know? But then everything else this episode has been, you guys are doing the stupidest stuff.
The dumbest fucking
to,
shit.
Like, to continue this kind of shit. Like, and I don't know how much we're going to have to believe this, whatever. Like, yeah, just leave your DNA all over the fucking like scene.
Just walk in. Oh my God, yeah. So here are my points in order. 1, why do they go to the studio of a dead man? 2, why do they go to the studio of a dead man without any sort of disguise? Oh my God. 3, such a weak game plan to just scrub the faces off of the paintings. It is super suspicious.
So the only thing I can say is that, no one right now can connect these two people because it was a secret. It was an affair. He has no online life. Like they can't connect him and Shauna, and she doesn't know what might be there that could connect her to him. And so she makes the right move to kind of at least check it out. And then she finds a whole bunch of paintings, and if all those paintings of her, like, then the police would obviously have some questions, right?
Yeah,
for her, when
but
otherwise they have no reason to connect her.
They waltzed into this like living situation. We know this is not the only place where someone dwells. There's a security camera like in the hallway. So if anyone comes to ask questions because this is where this dead man lived, and they're like, oh yeah, 2 people were just here a day ago. It's like, oh, 2 people were here a day ago and all the faces are like miraculously scrubbed off this painting. All you have to do is a freaking swipe for fingerprints and there's Shauna's shit just everywhere and probably some rogue semen. Like, just, what are you doing? What are you doing? Should have brought Misty. You should have let Misty fucking handle it because Misty would not be doing that shit. And then maybe I could have understood, but it just felt all very
even
like,
her own daughter.
Apparently, yeah, Sherlock Holmes Jr. Oh my God.
She can find out anything. What is that? What are we supposed to? Is she going to turn her
I don't fucking know.
mom and dad in? Is she gonna what is that daughter
I don't even
thinking?
think she knows. I think she's just in a mood. And that's fine. She's a teenager, and she obviously does not like see eye to eye with her mother.
Does she just want to be involved or something?
I almost feel like she wants to take something out on Shauna. She is constantly punishing her mother in some way, like with her actions and with her coldness. And I think if she thought there was a way that she could like kind of continue that energy, that she would do it. But what she doesn't realize yet, I don't think, is that this also wraps her dad into the situation. Like when she's like, how could you do this and not tell dad? And Shauna's like, haha, fuck you, I did tell dad. And she's like, how could you tell dad? You're so selfish. It's like, what? I don't even think she knows what she wants. I think right now she's kind of all over the place. She's having big feelings. She's a little bit of an agent of chaos, and she's just gonna like stir the pot.
I'll be honest, there's something in me that wishes there were more teenagers in this show in terms of like,
no,
more offspring of our adult
oh yeah, that'd be interesting.
Girls. Because there's an interesting comic book and they did make this into a show, and I don't know how it fared, but I do love this show. It's called The Runaways, where a bunch of teenagers, their parents get together every year to do this kind of like reunion thing, and then the kids always went off into like a back room to play like video games or do whatever, have pizza while the adults partied, and as they're teenagers, they're like, what is going on? Like, and they're like, we don't have to be stuck back here anymore. And then they somehow go like sneak out. They discover that the party's empty, and then there's like a secret passage, and they find out that all their parents are supervillains.
Right.
And they all have powers as well, So like,
Spoiler alert.
And it's a whole kind of awakening, and they don't. Now they're dealing with the fact that like our parents are bad, and this is a world where superheroes exist, and now like we have powers, and we're trying to figure. And they have to run away. They have to run away from their own parents,
right?
Who have done really, really bad things. And that's an interesting concept here for this girl to have to deal with. Like, my mom and dad are roped into something like really, really bad. What do I do with it? But there's no one for her to bounce off of. There's no one for her to kind of like go to this information. We don't know what's kind of going on through her head, what her motivations are, what she wants to do. And so there's like this, and I think it would have been interesting for all these kids, like because we're going from like them as kids to adults and then having offspring, like that could have been like a 3-generation kind of, or 2-generation kind of gap of seeing like how the wilderness affected them throughout generations. And yeah, there's like another kid, Thais' kid, and then there's this daughter. So like there are going to be things that obviously affect these kids, but I feel like not in the way that these themes could have been, I guess, more tied in, especially when you look at if they were all the same age as when those girls were out there in the wilderness. That's just something that I don't know why I tend to do this, where I think about, oh, this could have been better, but that's just my thoughts.
No, I think that's really interesting. I think there's a lot of potential there for an interesting storyline, but I also think we can muddle that pool very quickly if we had essentially like a third cast of characters to care about. So like for as interesting and intriguing as I think that pool would be, I also think that would be a fast way to just kind of get lost in like a lot of things happening and maybe fall into some traps of like tropiness. But I think something that might be interesting is if what my suspicion is true and that like the girl that we meet in the wilderness is Shauna's like first child, if there's a dichotomy between Shauna's daughter and Shauna's daughter that will ever play out.
Yeah. Here's the main question, right? There's not, in terms of all these storylines, I don't know that there's that much for us to talk about in what's going on from this first episode right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that said, based on what I was talking about, what do you think the showrunners are interested in? Because that's where I'm confused, right? I don't know what they're interested in telling anymore, because I thought it was about like how surviving out there was affecting them as an adults and like what the trauma that's kind of going on. That was really, really interesting. And now it's become a murder mystery kind of thing and not necessarily, I don't know exactly what they're trying to explore with all these characters. Do you have any thoughts? You said you had themes and everything.
I think, I think it all just ties back to the wilderness being special in some capacity, whether it's mystical, magical, because it brings something out in you that you can unlock for yourself. I think the main theme is going to be like reckoning with the truth of who we are in our darkest and most primal ways. But I think the way that they're going to eventually do that is through the lens of Lottie, because that's like the like sparkle of the season. And
I think, do you think Lottie I think it is going to be, as you said before, like Jack has to go back and that kind of is it with Natalie and everything, right? Do you think Lottie's trying to get them all back? Do you think that's a part of it? 'Cause clearly she goes and grabs Natalie for whatever reason. And then she has a message from Travis. I don't know what's kind of going on there, but you think she needs them all back for?
Yeah. I don't know why, but also because I watched Lost, and that is such a like the island wants you back. Like he wanted them back, so I can see that Lottie. The goal would be to bring the crew together again. Yeah, but why? And to what ends? Whereas Lost was a show, to me, about morality. It's like, what is this?
Yeah, and if it does end up just being a rehash of Lost, though, then to me, that's not a good... there's no point,
I
right?
agree.
And so, whereas it was more grounded, and the supernatural elements in the first season were just, again, more coincidence, and... unless they're on mushrooms, like having visions, and there's like these things, and it's all happening clearly in their minds and stuff. There was some really compelling storylines going on there of just having to deal with what happens to a mind, kind of stuff out there. But now it's getting into there's some pretty crazy stuff going on, and I don't know what, and it feels very much like you said, like Lost. Yeah, the island's reaching out to them, and they're all going to have to get reconnected somehow. Right. And
I want to trust that there is a projection. There is an arc. I want to trust that there is a point to it. It's just right now,
it's hard
I don't
to
see it. And I don't know what it is, but that doesn't mean I'm not interested, but I would argue that I'm more interested because I saw the potential of what Lost kind of came into and how that sucked me in.
Sure.
So I'm hoping that this sucks me in a different way because it is a different show with different circumstances. But I want to touch back on the show you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, The Wilds, and why that show to me didn't hit as hard as Yellowjackets did, because you got that quick little reveal that maybe it's some sort of social experiment at the end of season 1.
Well, it is. It's not something. Right. It basically is.
Which is cool, but I think felt familiar to me. Whereas with Yellowjackets, I was like, this is unique. This is, even though we have elements of different shows and I can feel the influences of different things, it felt very just original and authentic to its little world. Yeah. And now I really feel myself being well, cool. Are we seeing the numbers for 8, 12, 16? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's to me, it's this show is unique because the individual stories and the things going on internally were so compelling,
Mhm.
you know, in terms of their like personal stakes.
Yeah.
And now the personal stakes I think are becoming bigger, and then I guess I don't know what that is, right?
Yeah.
And as you make stakes bigger, like you kind of have to as you go season to
Right.
season. But it will be interesting. Again, I think the new blood will kind of help because
Mhm.
not like we're gonna drag in Elijah Wood, and I'm curious like what his like
Yeah,
how
how he
that's
plays
gonna
in.
come into play with his dynamic with Misty, as well as maybe if he becomes like a dynamic with the rest of the group,
Mhm.
right? We know from IMDb and from context clues that Lauren Ambrose is playing an adult Van, and that is a person that we were previously unsure if she ever got
Mhm.
out of the wilderness, if she
Mhm.
ever survived. So I am really interested to see what her thing is, because clearly she's not in love with, or Thais is not in love with Van anymore.
Yeah.
And I that fallout, that's going to be an interesting personal stake that I think will be coming.
Yeah.
So I think, again, finding these things will be curious, you know, how it changes these characters and what's kind of going on with them now, and like why we are here like 20 years later anyway.
Yes.
And I think the only we there's still people that we still don't know
Mhm.
have survived. Do you
Mhm.
think Javi is alive? And do you think he's alive 20 years later? Because what is going on with him? Because I think that is going to be, because you keep mentioning Lottie
Mhm.
is interesting, but I think what is going to start, I think it's going to be a twofer. I think it's going to be Lottie and Javi for some reason.
Mm.
Because otherwise, like, what is this thing that we're stringing along? Like, what is that about? You
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
I don't remember Travis's whole thing in the first season. I probably should have
I don't either.
refreshed
I
myself.
don't remember any of season
We'll
1.
figure it out before
Yeah.
episode 2. Do you think he's still alive, though, Javi? 20
Yeah.
years later? Interesting.
I do.
And what about Ben?
I don't care about Ben.
I do know that we get a Ben-centric episode.
How do you know that?
Again, some people have seen like the first 6 episodes, you know, so that's, I know.
I'm on the same internet that you are. How do you know? I feel like you go out of your
I
way
think it
to
was a
look for
Vanity Fair.
spoilers.
It was either Vanity Fair or /film.
I
So you
specifically
definitely got
don't
to
look at things like that. I should start looking at things like that.
I just looked at a review of Yellowjackets.
Yeah, it's okay.
I didn't know it was going to be the first 6 episodes.
Yeah,
It is more about, it's more generalized. Again, it doesn't spoil anything.
Sure.
It's just more generalized. And I thought it was just going to be about the first episode.
Mhm.
And it turns out that they had seen the first 6.
The first
So it
6.
just ended up being kind of like a general review of like the first half of the season.
The vibe.
So I do know we get a little bit more of Ben. I am curious again to delve more into these characters. I just wish I knew what
The fuck
it was that they wanted to do or say here. But yeah, that's, you know, interesting. Do you have any other theories or things that you want to talk about before we wrap things up?
No, my biggest conspiracy is that girl is Shauna's daughter. Check it. You heard it here first. Number 2, I also think.
Do you think Thais is gonna?
How did you know I was
hurt
going to
someone?
talk about Thaisa? I think Thaisa is going to play a huge role, maybe with Lottie or like in the realm of Lottie. I feel like they're more connected than I think. And just a little thing I liked right at the end where she ties her hair back and she crawls under that little pit and she sees the dead dog and the doll and everything. The shot is like you see her hands come up, and for the first like 2 seconds, I think she's going to start to pray at that altar. She like hits this point and then like breaks into her hands, but she's very specific about bringing her hands up like in this prayer position, and she touches here. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if, because we know Lottie is like the prayer and the mysticism too. And then if like sleepwalking Thaisa has any of that energy in her, like, are those the 2 pools of her being this like political force and also like something else?
The only thing I can imagine is that Thaisa, whatever happened out in the wilderness, I think she will end up, like Lottie ends up helping Thaisa, but also brings out that person who, again, as you said, acceptance. Who is it that you are? Who you really are out there? I think she starts bringing out that sleepwalking Thaisa into the forefront, and then Thaisa and Lottie kind of team up in essence. I think that's what drives the wedge between her and Van, because that's not the Thaisa that she knows. I think Thaisa eventually stops becoming like Lottie's like right-hand man, so to speak, and then becomes an adult and pushes all that away and buries it within herself and manages to escape it. And now it's all coming back up. And I think it is going to get brought back out for Lottie. And it is dangerous, the fact that this is a senator now, and like how that's going to come into play if she starts, I guess, spreading Lottie's message, if that's what they're going with. But I have no idea.
I don't even know.
But I do think that there's something that happened out there, and I think that Lottie and her are going to start becoming kindred spirits in that sense, because it is going to be that thing that is more accepted as like, this is who you should be. And I think that part of her clearly is dangerous and clearly is violent and clearly like wants blood or something, you know? And I think that's going to be like super interesting, like what that is. Right now, not interested at all in what's going on with Thaisa, because like just like what, because it's just all mystery and no, I guess, Phil, you know.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else?
That's all I got.
Okay. Well,
that's all I got.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know that. We're all interested in what's going to happen. This is just wheel spinnings, and then as it was, and here we are. Thank you everyone for joining us, though. Please let us know what you think is going to happen. What are the big mysteries that you're interested in? What are the questions that you hope get answered? And what do you think this show is ultimately going to be about?
Where are we going?
Is it just about cannibalism? Who knows? To engage with us and ask these questions or answer any of these questions, you can do that by emailing us at codependentcontent@gmail.com. That's the name of this podcast at gmail.com. You can also, again, go to the Discord where we record this live, and you can do some posts. Sometimes I'll have a post up or asking questions, and you can feel free to talk, chat, do whatever. Just ping us whenever you want if you just want to have a chat about it. Like, let's start our own theory corners. Let's freaking do it. I want to know. I want everything to come from our Discord, which is the Vulgarian Order, I should mention. It's not Codependent Content, because there are more things coming from this whole Discord, not just this podcast as the whole idea. Anyway, and you can also, sometimes we'll have a poll or some questions up on Spotify. So if you do listen through this on Spotify, you can answer there and engage with us there. Or just, if you like to watch this on YouTube, leave a comment. Whatever. I'm giving you so many options right now for you to be able to get. Please do that. Don't just wait for us to post clips on TikTok. Come join us. We're around, and we like to see that engagement. Yeah. But yeah, I'm gonna try something new today. Until next week, Shannon, I'd like to ask you and our audience, will you join me next week to watch Yellowjackets episode 2?
Oh my God, yeah.
You go on a date with us for Codependent Content. Great.
Yeah.
It's a date.
It's a date.
See you there.